Welcome to the Why Didn't I Know podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jenny Martin, and on this episode, we're talking about opening your heart to love. The topic of opening your heart to love is not just about finding a new relationship. It's even if you're single. Being able to be in the world and have an open heart means that you can feel compassion for other people, means that you can feel connected to other people, means that in platonic relationships, you can feel that felt sense of connection, having deep conversations, feeling that mutual care and respect for each other is all part of having an open heart. And of course, it goes without saying, if you are in a romantic relationship, having an open heart is crucial, because that's where the joy of the relationship is. The joy is knowing that this is your person, knowing that they love and care for you. And, I'm thinking about the book, The 5 Love Languages, that talks about the different ways people express love. And there's a lot of validity to that. Acts of service, words of affirmation, touch, and so forth. But it is our willingness to have our heart open in the first place that makes any of those different love languages actually be valid, be authentic. Because you could go through the motions in one of those types of love languages and not have your heart into it. So you could think, well, my partner likes acts of service, so I'm going to go take the garbage out, or I'm going to go make dinner. But you're doing it in a really disconnected way. And even though it might check the boxes of what your partner is looking for, it doesn't really make you feel joy in the way that it could. And it doesn't really bond you to that other person. Intellectually, they'll appreciate, and maybe even emotionally at some extent, that you've done it. But the full experience of being in love won't be there if you're just doing the different love language as a duty. And the possibility of actually being in love with another person, I believe, is the greatest joy we are given as humans. Because when it is all said and done, when people are on their deathbed and they might have amassed a financial fortune in their life, they might have even had fame, it's their loved ones that they're wanting to connect to. The life of Steve Jobs is just one example. He recognized when he was ill at the end of his life that it was not his accomplishments, it was the relationships that were more important to him than anything. And sometimes we don't know that. We pursue what the world tells us to pursue only until it ends up making us feel an existential angst and a sense of isolation and loneliness. And it's not that pursuing material goals is wrong. We're here to have it all. We're here to be able to be prospered and successful. But when it comes down to it, having another person in your corner that you can trust, that you can bounce things off, that isn't just a roommate that you live with, that you share expenses with, that you share house duties with or parenting with, but someone that knows you, knows your soul. I believe the most profound way for us to incorporate spirituality into our lives, when we become the expression of the divine in service to another person, and I don't mean being a doormat, I mean expressing love to another person, we are being the divine in action. And if we ask the divine to feel more love, to feel the love of the divine, I feel like you don't love me. The very best way is to actually be loving to another person. And we get that opportunity at such a deep level to do that in romantic relationship. Because when someone gets that close to you, when they know your vulnerabilities as well as your strengths, and they know things that irritate you, and sometimes they will push those buttons intentionally because we are human after all. But the willingness for all of us to allow that to be a spiritual path, allow yourself not to get pushed into resentment, react from meanness or coldness, but to give compassion and realize, okay, this other person had a hard day, this other person, loves me, and I don't need to get upset by just this one thing that they said. Now, I recognize it's easier said than done, and I also just want to be very clear, this is not the way that you deal with someone who's abusive. When someone is abusive, you need to take care of yourself and work on your consciousness so that you can remove yourself from that. A lot of times people believe that's all they deserve and they don't even feel like they deserve to leave. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about someone who you know has your best interest at heart, who you know is devoted to you, but they have moments where they forget and they act in certain ways that are impatient or negative or so forth towards you. The question is, can you let that go? And can you look for the goodness in that person? And that allows you to also bring forth the goodness in you. And there's something about when two people are together and they're both focused on the highest and best, wanting to bring the highest and best out of each other, wanting to focus on that, it magnifies more than 1 + 1. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. There's an exponential effect. And in my work, I talk about concepts to do with Christian mysticism. And this is the whole idea of what is talked about in Scripture of where two or more are gathered, I'm in the midst. When two people are together in a relationship with the intention to bring the divine forward in their lives, to focus on that intrinsic goodness in each other, there is an exponential effect. And then when we're talking about actual intimacy, lovemaking, it is not just seeing the divine in the other person and one person becomes the God and the other one becomes the goddess. In the Christian mysticism path, it's about, yes, we both have the divinity within us, but when we enter this state of sublime surrender, not to our partner, but to the divine, there becomes space in the room, space in your consciousness for a third presence to show up. And this is the esoteric meaning of Trinity. When the two of you allow your consciousness to expand to an awareness that there's a presence beyond either of you that is a part of the pleasure experience. So the divine is the epitome of unconditional love, is the epitome of ecstasy and bliss. And when we are giving ourselves over to pleasure, not just for the sake of pleasure in and of itself, but with the element of worship of the divine, Yes, the divine within us, but there's also a divinity that supersedes us. We didn't create our own DNA. We didn't create our own cells in our body or the stars in the sky. There is a divinity that is beyond us. So there is a divinity that is greater than us. So to be able to have that sense of humility, that sense of awe and recognition, and bringing that sense into the divine lovemaking, this is where you get the sense that your heart is expanding beyond what it would normally expand when you're just loving your partner. So you can feel a sense of love that may show up as appreciation or gratitude or compassion or respect for your partner. But when you recognize that they're part of this vast universe that is operating in a divine way, then you sense that your heart can connect with the divine through connecting with them. Now, we need to take our awareness off the chaos in the world, the news and the headlines that we read, because that'll tell us there is no divine in the world. There is no divine order. But below the chaos is the order. And your intellect, your waking consciousness, is just not going to see it. It's only going to see what the headlines tell you. That's why the spiritual practice of lovemaking becomes so vital, actually vital to our existence in these tumultuous times we're living in. The spiritual practice of keeping your heart open through lovemaking nurtures our spirit. It gives our spirit, you could say, vital food. Because, we need actual food to nourish our cells in our body and our brain and all of that. But we're malnourished spiritually if we only exist on what we're seeing in the external world, the physical world. If we're only receiving input from that tells us what reality is, we're not nourishing our soul. And when we turn our awareness to the larger reality, the divine order underneath the chaos that we get to through lovemaking, we tune out of the physical reality and we tune into this divine reality. Now, how is that possible? You might wonder. Well, it's only possible when intimacy becomes not just a quick sexual experience. So it's not just intercourse, it's not just orgasm. What it is it's all of those things, but it's also slowing down. It's also touch and really feeling, connecting to when you're running your hand over your partner's body, not even going for the erogenous zones right away, putting all of your attention into your fingertips. What are you sensing? What temperature are you sensing? What roughness or smoothness are you sensing? All of that, every sensory input that you can get from your 5 senses, really, when you put your attention on that level of present moment awareness, what it starts to do is it facilitates a trance state, an altered state of consciousness. Not an incredibly deep one right away, but the more that you just stay with what's present and the more that you allow any thought to come up, but just return to the present moment experience, just let the thought show up in your mind as if it was a cloud floating through the sky. Observe it, but don't attach to it, and then see it floating off. Just letting your thoughts glide by if you keep that practice up while also paying attention to your five senses during this slow, sultry foreplay. What you will find is you're detached from the regular thoughts that you normally have, the sense of yourself that you normally have in waking state. All of that just takes a back seat to the moment at hand. And you start to realize that you have an awareness of yourself as pure presence. And you become so aware of your body, your partner's body. And there also is a moment in time when you just surrender to this sense that the separation between your body and your partner's body becomes less distinct. There is this sense of effortless flow between the two of you. Now, this is the exact opposite of sex as a controlled experience, sex as an awkward experience, where your mind is trying to anticipate what's going to happen next, or your mind is looking to manipulate or control what's going to happen next. None of that happens when you're in this flow state, which is accessible to all of us if we have the intention to be in the present like this, and if both you and your partner are on board ahead of time. But this won't be able to be effective if your heart is shut down. And what we need to do is pay attention to the disposition of our heart in times when we're not in the bedroom. So in times when we're not making love, because it's impossible to go through life bitter, resentful, worried, stressed out, and then enter the moment of sexual intimacy and be profoundly in this moment of effortless oneness, flow, open-heartedness, if you've been living the whole week or during the day in a state of panic or stress or, feeling rejected or resentful, any of those different ways we act that are survival emotions. And so the whole idea that romantic relationship is a spiritual practice comes down to this. It comes down to the fact that if we want to experience the full divine connection that is possible through sexual intimacy, it takes something. It takes a commitment to walk a path in your life where you're going to take the high road, where you're not going to take things personally that other people say. You're going to think the best of other people, and you're not going to spend time really focused on negative information. So information in the news, information that people share with you about why you should be worried about the times we're living in, and so forth. It's about stewarding your consciousness, not to deny what's going on, to receive the information about what's going on, but to also know that in the midst of the most chaotic times, whether it be in your individual life or the larger world, there's going to be strife, there's going to be struggle, there's going to be things to overcome that may seem impossible. But when you do it as a human, when you do it on your own, it can feel quite impossible. But that's the difference between walking a spiritual path and a human path. When you're walking a spiritual path, you're never alone. You are connected to something greater than you, and our human mind won't have all the answers it's not supposed to. If you had all of the answers about how to move through life, move through these impossible circumstances, if it was clear to you what to do, how to act, how to move through it, then we wouldn't need that connection to spirit. What I'm saying is there's a comfort and a security in knowing that life can throw anything at you, and it doesn't need to change this steady peace inside of you. Because that steady sense of peace inside of you is not generated by the ebb and flow of the external world. The steady peace inside of you is there because you are tethered to something that is much greater than you. Whether you call it the goddess, God, presence, whatever you call it. But that is the thing that created your body, created your consciousness, that is causing your heart to beat right now, that is moving the air through your lungs, all of those things that happen without your conscious attention. But if they weren't happening, you would not be alive right now. We take those things for granted, but they're part and parcel of this world of the divine intelligence that has a sense of order, divine harmony that is underneath the chaos. And so being able to steward your consciousness and not allowing yourself to go into downward spirals of what if this happens, some kind of negative event or some kind of worrisome outcome. To catch yourself before you go down those downward spirals and to turn it over to the higher power. And to be grateful that even though you don't see the outcome in the physical world yet, that in the non-physical world, this situation is already resolved. And just to have that sense of peace in your heart, that there is a resolution already in the non-material world, and it's just a matter of time before it shows up in the material world. Now, we don't have control over how precisely that resolution turns out, but just to decide that this is going to turn out for the highest good of all concerned, and that you will feel a sense of peace with the results. Turning that over to the higher power, because if we use the sense of what we want, I'm going to make this happen. You hear stories all the time where people manifested something and then they regretted they manifested it. They might have tried to bring a certain person into their life. They get that person and then they realize they're miserable. And now they have to try to figure out how to shift that reality. But if you are walking a spiritual path where it's not just your own divinity that you're relating to, but a higher power that is within you, but also beyond you, then you turn over the situation to the divine, and it allows you a sense of peace that the outcome is going to be for the highest good. And that's our constant practice, whether we're in a romantic relationship or not. But when we're in a romantic relationship, it becomes extra specially important, because if you're living from one stressful event to the next, you won't be able to be in the sexual intimate connection with a sense of complete abandonment. And then if you add some kind of substance, whether it be alcohol or weed, you are further disconnecting from your spirit. You might feel a sense of bliss in the moment, but you're not connecting in the same grounded, intuitive way than if you had done it sober. And there's something that your own spirit feels naturally high, exalted about when you make this connection completely sober during sex. There's a sense of feeling so strong in your spirituality that you know that you did this organically. And there's this knowing that you can take that into everyday life. You can build your connection during lovemaking to even amplify your awareness of the mystical side during lovemaking. And that can fuel you through some of the challenges during your week, during your daily life, because you've glimpsed this higher reality. You know in your body, you felt it viscerally during those moments of intimacy. And so it's important to realize, if you've never experienced this, that we're not just talking about some bliss orgasmic moment. We're talking about the entire time you're in the sexual intimate situation with your partner, from the moment that you really give yourself over during the foreplay to right to the very end, past the orgasm, when you're embracing your partner, laying there next to each other. Because it is important to lay together naked, cuddling, and connecting after sex, not just getting up, cleaning up and going off and doing something else. The after play connection is as vital as the foreplay. And throughout that entire time, whether you're together for an hour, a few hours, an afternoon, an evening, a morning, that entire time can be in this divinely mystical connected state. You can be in a profound altered state of consciousness where you have DMT visions, where you have a sense of complete awareness of beings that you're able to talk to, angelic presences. Now, not everyone is going to sense that, but you are going to sense a feeling of being connected to something that you normally wouldn't during the day, because you're in a different level of consciousness during the day, which is entirely necessary. Because when you're doing your job, when you're driving a car, when you're doing very pragmatic things, it's not helpful to be in a mystical realm. I mean, you're going to crash your car. You're not going to write that email, very coherently if you're off in another realm. And so being able to be very grounded and live in a very practical way is necessary part of living a spiritual life. We're not retreating to a mountain and meditating all day. I mean, we have jobs to go to and life to go to, and it's a very useful balance, because spirituality becomes real when you can take those blissful moments and translate them to an angry coworker and not getting ruffled by that, or a screaming kid, and allowing yourself to be patient in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise if you weren't doing your spiritual practice. So it's not like life becomes suddenly easier and there's no problems, but it's that you bring a new consciousness to it. You're not excited when some news that is positive comes to you, or deflated when something that you wished would happen didn't. There's a sense of evenness, but not a sense of detachment either. There's a sustained sense of joy. And that might sound completely unrealistic, especially in the, you could say, dark times we're living in now. But that is possible, especially if you steward your consciousness and don't allow yourself to focus on a lot of the doom and gloom information that is out there. Going through the challenging times that we're going through in the world right now is causing many people to look to a spiritual teaching, to look to a spiritual reality. And it's not like God, or whatever you want to call God, is creating this type of crisis to force us into spirituality. I don't believe that for 1 second. Humans have created the mess on the planet. It's 100% human created. But can there be a purpose to this? Not necessarily that the God has orchestrated this to happen to cause us to be like this, but there can be a usefulness to going through challenges, especially collective challenges like we're going through today. It causes us to dig deeper. It causes us to go beyond just the way we normally would cope with things. And I know during the pandemic, when the normal was taken from us, when the way we would typically lead our lives was no longer possible, many people did start turning to looking at spirituality as something to investigate that might never have done before. Because when there is uncertainty, when there is a level of not being able to figure things out on your own, that's when spirituality becomes real. The idea that, okay, I cannot figure this out myself is actually a great place to be, because then you get the sense that, okay, if this whole spirituality thing is real, if this whole God thing actually is real, then I'm going to live like it is. Like, I'm going to test this out. And what you invariably find is that there is a sense of peace. There is a sense of harmony that shows up in your life. You'll be able to cope with things that you are surprised about that used to make you absolutely fall apart. And that you don't walk around thinking about worst case scenario like you used to, or taking things personally like you used to. There's a sense of evenness to your emotional state. And there's a sense of assurance, a sense of assurance and security. And this is so important because in romantic relationship, if we're looking to our partner to be our rock, to be our sense of security, and I'm not talking about financial, I'm talking about emotional. If we're depending on them for that, they're human and they're going to let us down at some point. It's just natural. And if we don't source from something beyond another person, then we're vulnerable. Then we don't have a real secure foundation. When we can source from spirit, when we can really allow ourselves to know that there's something beating our heart, that there's something breathing through us that is beyond our finite mind, it's beyond its ability to even understand. And that when we can live with that awareness, and most especially when you're in a relationship with someone, another person who is also committed to living with that awareness, you both can weather storms together that would end up splitting up other couples, that would end up being too much for another couple. You go through things together and it actually strengthens your spiritual path. And that's only one side of it, is dealing with the challenges of life. On the flip side of this, you are able to enter a state of divine grace and divine oneness in a more natural, easy way because it's an expression, an extension of who you are. You've already made the intention that you're living from this spiritual way, that you're living from a sense of connected to something beyond you. And the beautiful thing about a romantic relationship is we can make this commitment individually that we're on a spiritual path. And, there'll be times where you forget and your mind starts to go into worry or panic about any given thing. But in those moments of forgetting, most of the time, our partner will not be in that same moment of forgetting. They'll have their own times when they're forgetting, and they can remind you of what you believe. And they can help you to remember times in your life where it felt impossible, but your connection to spirit showed up in tangible ways to smooth over situations, to resolve things, to shift crises into resolution. And we forget those in the moment oftentimes, but your partner can help you remember that. And all of a sudden you're shifting perception, and you get to do that for each other, to strengthen each other in that way. And that's part of the beautiful part of relationship. And all of that only becomes possible when you keep your heart open. Because if you take offense, if you live with worry and stress, you not only are cutting off that flow of the energy of love between you and your partner, you're also cutting it off from the divine itself. Not that the divine is rejecting you and is thinking that you're a sinful creature. That's not what I'm saying. But just at an energetic level, if we are consumed with fear, we're not going to be also able to contain love in the same moment. It's one or the other. And it comes down to a decision. How do we shift this feeling state in our body? We pay attention to the thoughts that are running through our mind. And if they're fear-based, worst-case scenario thoughts, it's our job to have radical optimism, to have hope, and to have belief and surrender to spirit that there is a way that this is going to work out that's beyond my finite consciousness to understand. And walking with that sense of being able to see beyond the physical, because the physical world will tell you there's no hope, this is not going to work out, but you're attuning your mind and your awareness to the non-material realm where the resolution already exists. There is no time, there is no space in that realm. And at the appointed time, whenever it is to be, that resolution will be made manifest in the physical realm. But our job as humans is to take our focus off of the problem area and onto the divine, which has the answers. And not to try to figure it out, not to try to figure out or anticipate how things will all work out, but just to know, keeping your attention on that non-physical realm, to know that it is already resolved, and to give gratitude. That allows you to live with an open heart. That allows you to live in a way that is allowing the flow of love from the divine to connect with you and then flow from you through to your partner. And that is something that we all have access to. This connection to the divine is available to all people. This ability to open our heart and tap into those resources, that wisdom, is available no matter who you are in society and what your status is in terms of a worldly view of things. We're all the same in terms of our spiritual essence. It's what we do with it and where we put our attention in terms of working with it or being completely unaware of it and living life as if we're on our own, stuck, human, and that's it. We all have access to this higher reality, and we don't need an intermediary. We don't need a guru. We don't need a priest. We don't need anyone except our heart to guide us to this awareness. So, in conclusion for this episode, I challenge you to pay attention to your thoughts. Pay attention to your thoughts, most especially when you have a feeling of dread, you have a feeling of worry or stress. As soon as that feeling comes over you, ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? And just pay attention to the content of the thought. And it's going to be some thought that is actually generating that feeling that you have. And you get to choose to switch that thought with the opposite. You get to choose that. And you can also ask the higher power to help bring that new thought to you, to help your heart to connect to that new thought, that higher thought. And that's how we can live consciously as opposed to just moving through life, reacting to whatever happens around us and being completely unconscious that we are living in a state of stress and anxiety all the time. We don't need to live that way. We can live by paying attention to what the thought is that preceded the feeling, because there will be a thought before there will be a feeling. And if we shift that thought with the help of the divine, if we're only working at the level of our psychology, it'll be a constant struggle. You'll constantly be trying to reframe your thoughts. But when you hand it over and say to the divine, please bring this sense of peace into me now. I'm having trouble bringing this sense of peace. If that's true, if you're struggling with that, ask, make that a prayer, and affirm that it's already happened. Give gratitude that it's happened. And in that way, we become more spiritually sovereign. We take ourselves out of the rat race, out of the matrix, so to speak, where people are just like rats in a maze, running around, reacting to everything that's happening, and never being sovereign of their consciousness. And we're not to blame for that. I mean, we're told that we don't have a lot of control over how we think and feel. It just happens to us. But that's not what the spiritual path calls us to. The spiritual path calls us to being conscious and being a choice, and not doing it just from our human self, doing it in connection to the divine. And that allows us to go through life and have our heart open, which is a total necessity to be able to experience the depth of what's possible during romantic relationship, committed romantic relationship. So I'll leave that with you. Thank you so much for joining me today. If this podcast has been helpful to you, or if this episode's been helpful to you, please rate and review this podcast. Thanks again for joining me, and I look forward to meeting with you next time.